all supervisors, if you could please press your attend button. First, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation by Supervisor Laux.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Supervisor Laux.
Bless us as we gather for this meeting and hope that we can have peaceful discussions and reach proper conclusions. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Supervisor Laux. Next item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda for this evening. I'll call on Supervisor Roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move for the approval of this evening's agenda.
There's a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We're now at that time of the meeting in which we invite public comments on anything on the agenda or anything under the jurisdiction of county government. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? Is there anyone who wishes to speak? Yes, sir. Please give your name and address for the record.
My name is Jeff. Lemish, 2230 Plymouth Street, Oshkosh, Wisconsin. I'm here with a resolution of 064-082-018, to vote on the $175,000 purchase for the 20 acres of land for the Centerview Expo Center. I said before earlier I was in favor of this, but after consideration, I am not in favor of spending another $175,000 of our taxpayers' money for what? Life Fest? For what? They already spent $180,000 to get rid of the racetrack. I'd like to know who's going to be paying for the stormwater runoff, for the stage, for the cement pad that was put down, for all the gravel. Who's going to pay for all that? Taxpayers. You know, it's a shame that the department head didn't work with the tenants that were out there and wanted to see how they could have worked together to make everything coexist. But we feel, as a racing community, it was a witch hunt. So therefore, I am definitely against the resolution of spending $175,000 to purchase the land.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? One last time, is there anyone else who wishes to speak on any item on the agenda or anything before the county government? Okay, we will close that portion of the meeting. So we'll move on down to the next item, which is correspondence, and I'll call on the clerk.
You have a thank you note from Evan Kubiak. Dear members of the Winnebago County Board, I'm writing to communicate my appreciation as a recipient of your scholarship. As I continue my studies, I can't wait to capture what the future holds and learn more about law and county government. The meetings which I have sat in on in the past have been very interesting, and I intend to familiarize myself with the politics and local issues. Thank you again for the generous scholarship. Then he's got a P.S. I appreciate Mr. Stephen Lenz taking his time to personally present the scholarship to me at Neenah High School. I am thoroughly enjoying the county book you gave me and plan on bringing it with me to Butler. I'm sorry, he's going to Butler as I start my school year. So, Evan Kubiak. We have a petition for zoning amendment from Randall B. Streblo in the town of Nakaimai, requesting a zoning change from R8 A2 to R2 for a house. This is referred to planning and zoning. And then we have a number of resolutions from other counties, and those are listed on your agenda. The one is from Adams County, and Barron, two from Barron, Monroe, and Sawyer. And they're all in regards to things that the board has had before them before. And those will go on to legislative, Chairman Egan was told about them already, so.
Thank you, Clerk. Next item on the agenda is reports from committees, commissions, and boards. Any report outs from any committee, commission, and board? First, I'll call on Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to report on the attendance at the Wisconsin Counties Association Judicial and Public Safety Steering Committee, July 19th at Madison. What is probably of interest to the board are 7 Wisconsin County Association conference resolutions that were presented and passed by the steering committee. These resolutions will go on to the Convention Resolution Committee to be voted upon, and if passed by the Counties Association Board or the membership, it will go on to the legislature. These resolutions are to permit state inmates in county jails for work release, support state-funded treatment alternatives to incarceration and diversion from prosecution programs, fully fund treatment courts, address mental health, drug addiction in county jails, support the increase to public defender access to pay, which we passed at our last session, support the district attorney's office staffing, and to support expungement of records after sentence served under certain conditions. And I might add that this points out the relevance and importance of the work of your legislative committee. Over the past legislative session, which began January 1st, 2017, your legislative committee has hosted state representatives Mike Rawcast, Amanda Stuck, Mike Schra, Gordon Hintz, Dave Murphy, as well as Senator Dan Fayen, and federal level representatives, Al Ott of Congressman Glenn Grothman, and Jen Gardner for Senator Tammy Baldwin. All this happened right here in Oshkosh. They came to us. In contrast, our neighbor to the north, Outagamie County, has spent $144,000 over the last year and a half in lobbying activities with the state legislature. There are approximately 88 out of 400 reported lobbyist groups in their order of expense. And the Wisconsin Counties Association, in contrast, had spent about $550,000 during that same period of time. Our folks up north in Outagamie are doing the same job that we're doing here, and we're doing it for minimal cost. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker is Supervisor Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, I'd like to thank this board for its action last month on the request to the legislature to do an audit of the Wisconsin Department of Veterans Affairs. I appreciate that being brought forward by the Legislative Committee in my absence. And second of all, I would like to report on my attendance, along with several others, at the Butamore Bicentennial celebration on August 11th. It was a great celebration. Special thank yous go out to Senator Baldwin's representative, Jennifer Gardner, State Representative Dave Murphy, County Exec Mark Harris, and County Board Chairman Shiloh Ramos for their integral parts in that celebration. And I want you to know that the Bicentennial Committee in Butamore really appreciated it, and I think we had a great time. Thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor Snyder. Next speaker is Vice Chairman Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After the buildup that Supervisor Eisen just said about the Legislative Committee, which was very good and is very true, we do not have anything on the agenda for this month, so there will not be a meeting held. Like the county clerk said, everything that's on this for resolutions and that we've already talked about, and no one has called me or the clerk's office, so there will not be a Legislative Committee meeting. Second thing is, I want to thank all those of you that come to the fair this year, whether you judged or just come to look and see how it went. It was quite well attended and all that this year. We still got more bills coming in than we do money, so I can't give you any report on that. But again, I want to thank you all, and we really appreciate it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Egan. Seeing no other lights, we'll go ahead and move on down to the next item, which is the approval of the proceedings from the July 17, 2018 County Board session. You should all have received those. Is there a motion? There's a motion and a second to approve the July 17th minutes. Any changes, discussion? And we'll do it by a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item on the agenda, County Executives Report and County Executives Appointments.
My tradition is to talk about a couple things that come up on the agenda and to draw the board's attention to them. There is an unusual item. The sheriff is going to speak in a little bit on purchase of squad cars. And I want to let the board know a little bit about the situation and that I fully approve of what he's going to tell you about purchasing squad cars. Year after year, we usually buy 7 squad cars. And by doing that each year, that gives them about a 3-year replacement cycle, which is about the amount of time the squad cars remain reliable. And we're constructing this year's budget. We've placed 6 squad cars in that budget instead of 7 because one squad car that would have been replaced was totaled. Someone drove into it while it was on the side of the road. And so that's being replaced primarily with insurance money and some money out of the sheriff's account this year. But an additional group of squad cars will have to be purchased. And because of this accident, the sheriff became aware that Ford is changing the platform of its pursuit car, basically changing what vehicle is going to be the car that's typically used by police, and that price will increase by $8,000 per vehicle when they change vehicles. So what the sheriff is looking to do is to go ahead and order the squad cars that are built into next year's budget. And that's out of our normal procedure. Our normal procedure is not to place any orders until this body has approved the purchase. But by placing the order now, they won't be delivered until next year after the budget. They don't have to be paid until next year after the budget. And should the board decide they don't want the regular amount of squad cars in the budget, I'm sure we can get other communities to take those orders for the older platform. But because it will save the taxpayers such a substantial amount of money, I'm going to allow him to place that order now for payment and delivery next year after the budget. And we'll work with whatever decision the board makes. But as long as I can remember, the board has approved those squad cars year after year. So that's why I'm willing to have the sheriff follow this unusual procedure. The other item in the agenda tonight that I want to talk about is the land. And what I want to point out is that the county normally does not approach people to buy their land, because if a government body approaches someone about purchasing their land that's not listed for sale, it triggers eminent domain proceedings, which drive up the cost of the land and require you to pay relocation costs. So we normally won't approach anyone about buying their land. We may use third parties to gain information about what someone might be interested in selling it, but we won't approach them directly and ask them if they want to sell their land, because just doing that could trigger eminent domain. So if you're going to acquire land, or you want land someday that's adjacent to our exposition center or to any of our other facilities, you normally have to wait for it to come up for sale. And then you have to make a decision at that time whether you're interested or not. And if it sells to another party, you really won't have another opportunity at that land unless someday they put it up for sale. So the timing's not ideal, but the county's put in the position that if you want to acquire additional land adjacent to the exposition grounds, you really have to move when it comes up for sale. And in this case, the resident of that property, I believe she moved to a nursing home and subsequently passed away, and that's why the land is now available. So I would urge support of that purchase. I don't think we need it at this time, certainly not for Life Fest. I do think it will serve some park purposes, especially with regard to horse shows, but it doesn't matter. If you ever think you're going to need it, you probably should acquire it when the opportunity comes up. And that's all I have for my comments. Unless there's questions, I do have an appointment. And I have an appointment to the Aging and Disability Resource Center Committee, and it's Rob Patterson.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, County Executive. I apologize. We do have one question. Supervisor Norton?
Yeah, I had it for the county executive. It was reported in the Northwestern this weekend that because of the dark store loophole, that the city had settled out of court for, I don't know what amount of dollars. Do you know what that'll cost the county?
You know, I don't know the details of that. Is it one of the larger big box retailers? Yeah, typically, and I know Lowe's was asking for a 70% discount in their assessment. So I couldn't tell you the dollar amount of revenue that the county gets, but it would be a 70% reduction in our share of the property tax as well, if that's what they were granted.
One follow-up, kind of related question. The city of Oshkosh in July allocated, I think, $8,000 to be part of an effort to pass the referendum that we passed, the advisory referendum, against the dark store legislation and against that loophole. Do you know, has the WCA approached you or any of the counties to chip into this type of fund?
To my knowledge, the Wisconsin Counties Association has not asked for any money to lobby on this issue. I did, however, do an Oshkosh show that touched on a variety of topics, but primarily on the dark store referendum to kind of alert the public to what referendums were on the ballot. I talked about that one, and I also talked about the referendum for fair redistricting, just as a small part of helping some voters know what they're going to see on that ballot. And it would be great if all the board members could pass on to some of their constituents that those referendums are going to be on the ballot.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Next item on the agenda is the county chairman's report. So I have a few items. First one is Supervisor Snyder actually referred to it, but I actually wanted to congratulate and thank him for his involvement, for some of his coordination with the event. It truly was a wonderful event, and I gotta say, Winnebago County was in good hands for that one day, August 11th of this year. So kudos to Vitamore and kudos to you, Supervisor Snyder, for your involvement. Also wanted to congratulate and thank our Vice Chairman Egan for another county fair. As you all know, Vice Chairman Egan has been involved as the president of the Fair Board for many years. He's done a wonderful job, so just wanted to thank you for your involvement once again. One item I wanted to bring up was in follow-up to our last county board meeting, and it's actually procedural, but it dovetails into something else a little bit as well. But I'll start with a rule. We were debating, and there was a motion to call the previous question, at least once, I think twice. And I kind of wanted to go over that rule for you because I know I made an error with moving through that motion. I wanted to share that with you all, so A, you all know, first of all, that I recognize that. Second of all, though, so we all can be educated on what that motion is and what the rules behind it are. So I know it occurred at least once last time. I think it occurred twice. But when a person calls the previous question or a motion to call the previous question, what they are essentially doing is a motion to end the debate on that motion. Now, the first thing is they have to be recognized to be able to make that motion. And you really shouldn't recognize someone who calls out that motion when another individual is speaking, simply out of courtesy. So the first all is important that I recognize that person when they call the motion. It requires a second, but it's not debatable. However, there was at least once last time where I actually didn't put it to a vote, and it does require a vote. And I know that, and I just missed that in that debate. It requires a vote, and it actually has to pass by a 2/3 majority. And if 2/3 vote in favor of the previous question, then it passes, which means then we would truly end debate on that motion, and we would vote directly on that motion immediately after that. If less than 2/3 vote for it, it fails, which means we're back on the motion that immediately preceded the previous question, and we're back to debating it. Okay? So I just wanted to educate you all. I educated myself all about it, and recognize that, frankly, I could have done that a little bit better in the last county board meeting. So that dovetails into something else, though, because it's all about rules, right? We use rules to conduct our business as we go about it here. And as you know, one of our agenda items is in fact one of our rules and possibly considering changing it. Now, I would tell you that those are hard and fast rules, right? When you vote on them. I would also tell you that there are rules of decorum. And I think we all need to be mindful of that and live by those rules. Now, we all may have different rules of what that means, but I think we all know what it means when we say it. So what I'd urge us as a body is to be mindful of that as we go about our business. We're all passionate folks, but just as we need to have those hard and fast rules, we need to adhere to those rules of decorum at the same time. And so that leads me into one other thing about rules, or rules of decorum, I would call it. And I've heard from a couple of supervisors over the past month or two about comments that they have heard on social media. And some of these comments are in regards to other county supervisors. And they're deriding comments. And, well, we all have a right to say what we want. Doesn't mean it's right to do it. I can't stop you all from doing it, but I can encourage you to try to do the best you can to refrain from doing it. I certainly will be mindful myself as well, so I hold myself to the same standard as well. The last item I wanted to bring up was actually a very happy thing, because yesterday was the birthday, the 91st birthday of our own Supervisor Robo. So I want to congratulate and say happy birthday to Supervisor Robo. Happy birthday, Supervisor Rowe. And that concludes the chairman's report. So moving on down to the next item, which is a memorandum. It's an interpretation of Rule 7.7 of the Rules of the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors from our Corporation Counsel, Mary Ann Miller. She did have a memo, but she's going to go over that and provide an opportunity to ask and answer any questions. So, Corporation Counsel.
Thank you. As you may all recall, at the last meeting, there was a question regarding the interpretation of Rule 7.7, And your chairman asked me to essentially look into the matter, and I did so. And basically, as the memo indicates, I looked at the law, I spoke with various other attorneys, corporation counsels, I even spoke with members of the judiciary. I do have to say, as Attorney Wingren had pointed, or Mr. Wingren had pointed out earlier, see, I'm already making him an attorney. I was not able to speak with the Judiciary and Public Safety. Unfortunately, their meeting conflicted because I had a trial on the day that their meeting went forward. But I did speak with a number of people, including Supervisor Rasmussen. And essentially, my opinion stands. The rule states, as it exists currently, and you can see it in the memo, any resolution that is presented for the purpose of expressing support or opposition regarding any pending or proposed state or federal legislation shall require a 3/4 vote of those members present for passage. It actually said member, but it should have said members. And so the real hangup was the wording of pending and proposed. And as I stated in my memo, the law in Wisconsin is clear. You have to basically look at the words common and ordinary meaning. If the language is clear and plain, the analysis stops there. There was a question regarding the fact that, well, wait a minute, the session goes until the end of the year, so why isn't it pending? This rule, as you may recall, was really, I believe, focused on a couple of resolutions that the board was considering, one involving marijuana and one involving conversion therapy. So I basically made some calls down to Madison and learned that bills that don't reach the governor's desk are dead, and you can determine the status of a bill by looking at its history. Now, there were 9 bills during the 2017-2018 session that dealt with marijuana. You had Assembly Bill 75, Assembly Bill 409, Assembly Bill 482, Assembly Bill 724, Assembly Joint Resolution 7, Senate Bill 38, Senate Bill 318, Senate Bill 611, and Senate Joint Resolution 10. All of those bills basically died. And you can tell that it died because if you go into the legislative history, it says next to each bill, quote, failed to pass/adopt pursuant to Senate Joint Resolution. In order to be resurrected, the bill would have to be reintroduced in the new session and would have a new bill number assigned to it. So that means, let's say January 1, 2019, this could come up again. There was one bill, as I indicated in my memo, dealing with conversion therapy, but again, that bill went nowhere also. So basically, as I had told a number of people, I said that if the board was not happy with the words used in Rule 7.7, your Rule 3.8 allows the board to amend the rules, and it basically says that when it's not during an organizational meeting, it can be amended during the 2-year period by a 2/3 vote of those present. There were a number of supervisors who talked about language, and I said, you know, you just would need to work on that language. So I think there are going to be some proposals, because when I did see the language, I had a question regarding the word initiation. They were talking about proposed or pending, or I'm sorry, it talked about opposition or support of, and it also talked about initiation. So let's say there was a concern about something that's not on the plate. Let's say, you know, you would have a penalty if you don't have a balanced budget, or, you know, we're going to talk about, I don't know, banning abortion. So if you wanted to do something that was totally new, that's where this initiation language came. And I talked about tweaking it because in the context of how it was written, I thought it could be worded in a more clear fashion. But in any event, those are my opinions. And again, I am sorry that I was not able to connect with anybody from Judiciary and Public Safety. But anyway, and I would hope you accept my apologies.
Thank you. I think we have one question, Corporation Counsel. Supervisor Hogan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I had a question, I guess, then maybe if you can enlighten us on the interpretation of the difference between a pending versus proposed legislation. Because it seemed to be that the bills that are being reviewed by the legislature would be pending. What would be the difference between that and a proposed?
If there was a bill that was proposed and not during the period of time, let's say, that it had not made it to an agenda item. So again, I guess we could certainly go to the committee to see what the committee meant when it put the word proposed in.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is the 2019 purchase of 6 squad cars. Sheriff Motz is going to provide a presentation. Sheriff?
Good evening. The county exec did a pretty good job explaining the situation that we're in. We lost a squad to a crash, and when we tried to order it, that's when we were notified by the vendor that won the state contract that 2019 squads were only going to be available up for order up until September 21st. Anything after that was going to be a 2020 squad, and that's a hybrid squad, which is approximately $8,000 more. Now, there's some savings in fuel and some of the other things. However, the platform changed. So we are hoping, even though the budget's not approved yet, that we can actually issue a PO for those remaining 6 cars, which would have been 7, but we're replacing one that was crashed. Now, these squads will come at the normal, if we're allowed to do this, they'll come at the normal time, which is February, March. If we're not, they'll be delayed until about August, which we can get by with the squads that we have, but it does change our rotation a little bit for future years.
Any questions for the sheriff? Supervisor Bender?
Just out of curiosity, I know probably in the last month and a half you sold around 6 or 7 old squads. They sold anywhere from $6,000 to $8,000. Where does that money go?
That money is put back as revenue in our budget to be used for operating costs, offset operating costs.
And what is the cost of a new squad?
A new squad is about $28,000, $26,000, $28,000.
So you actually, it's a pretty good deal. You put 100,000 miles on them, and they cost the taxpayers less than about $16,000. So I
Right.
would think it's a, if we can get 9 of them for that price, it would be a good deal.
Okay.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender. I believe we have one other question. Supervisor Powers?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff, when you say it would change rotations, are you talking about personnel shifts, or what do you mean by would change rotations?
Because the squad would not be online, it would come in August if we're forced into purchasing squads that are 2020, because it wouldn't arrive until August. By the time we go through our changeover and all of the things that have to happen, it wouldn't really be online until September sometime, and that is about a 6-month difference in mileage 3 years from now, because every 3 years we purchase new cars. So it would throw our rotation off. I'm not quite sure exactly. We could probably work it so that those cars are used a little bit more to get more use out of them during that 3 years. But it does change it a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. Seeing no other questions, thanks, Sheriff Motz. And that completes our presentation, so since we have no zoning reports, we'll move right down to the resolutions and ordinances. So the first one is resolution number 061-082018, commendation for Linda Kreese. Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for resolution 061-08-2018.
Motion and a second, please go ahead.
Linda Kreese started work with Winnebago County in February 1975. Her first position was as a clerk dispatcher with the Sheriff's Office. In 1991, she moved to the District Attorney's Office, and in 1998, became a member of management as Office Supervisor for the District Attorney. Linda was a great listener and always had an open door policy. She was very dedicated to her job and the county. She seemed to have a connection in every department and was well respected by many. Her office staff particularly appreciated the fact that she liked to bring in one heck of a taco dip. Linda retired on August 1st, 2018, after 43 years of service to Winnebago County. She is looking forward to spending time checking things off her bucket list. Please join me in thanking Linda for her service to our county.
Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. We'll take a voice vote on the commendation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next resolution. Resolution number 062-082018. Approved values on in-rem tax deeded properties. Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for resolution number 062-08-2018.
Is there a second? There's a motion and a second. Any discussion in regards to the resolution? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next resolution. Resolution number 063-082018. Approved transfer of property to City of Neenah. Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you. I move for resolution number 063-08-2018.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion in regards to the resolution? Supervisor Norton.
I had a question, and maybe you can help me, Mr. Chairman, since you're on the Health Committee and you're on the Neenah City Council. Is this the property that we had problems with the Health Board, with contaminate and that? Do you remember that we had a couple years ago? And then also, do we know what the City of Neenah is going to do with this property? Or maybe, I know people are going to say it's not our concern, but I'm just curious.
So the first answer is yes, I believe it is that property. B, I don't know what the City of Neenah plans are. Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Next speaker is Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you read the resolution, it says that we're going to give away commercial property to the City of Neenah for nothing. My question is, why? I would like to hear a statement of the history of the property, efforts to sell the property, its current market value, and how much money did we pay Neenah to buy the taxes from them for that property? They want the property for nothing, but we had to pay them all the back taxes on that property that was due to the city. We should at least get from them the taxes that we paid to them. And the other question would be, what benefit is this to the county?
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. I believe the treasurer is in the back and can answer some of your questions.
Thank you. According to the statute that the City of Neenah requested us to proceed with the foreclosure action, we have two options. We have to foreclose because they are instructing us to do so by statute. We have two options once we foreclose, and it's up to this board. We can either retain the property, or we can transfer it over to the City of Neenah for no consideration. Those are our only two options under that statute. The property has an extensive history with the DNR dating back to 1999. It's a former dry cleaning site in the City of Neenah. They have since raised the building on the property and have it asphalted. Basically, they have concealed it or covered it, contained it. It's contaminated with VOCs, basically dry cleaning solvents is what the property is contaminated with. Our total cost into the property, our hard costs, meaning the property taxes that we have purchased over the last number of years, and our cost to foreclose. The hard costs are $23,338. That does not include the interest that has been accumulating on those, because that's not considered an actual expense, because we haven't spent that money. It's anticipated revenue that we could be getting. The interest is just over $13,000. So our total between the hard costs, our expenses, and the interest is $36,428. The city of Neenah asked us to do this because the property was dilapidated. It was an eyesore. It needed to be raised. It's right on South Commercial, right on one of their main arterial roads into the city of Neenah. They plan on retaining it, and down the road, possibly it could be used for future development. I did go on the DNR's website, and there has been about almost $300,000 put into this property in grants for testing and everything for this property. So I don't really think it's something that we would want to hang on to. But again, that is up to this board to decide.
Thank you, Treasurer Krieger. Next speaker is Supervisor Defferting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looks like a lot of those the questions that Supervisor Eisen brought up was already answered, so that was going to be half of the things I was about to say. I did some research on my own, found out that the owner of the property passed away, was passed on to the son. Son had no interest in keeping it, and then they went in rears on property taxes. It seems to be, though, that it's fantastic location. I know it's a location that City of Neenah wants to develop. And that's like the second main corridor into Neenah. And I know that the city of Neenah wants to develop that area. With that being said, it's kind of a tragedy that we have to turn this over to the city of Neenah's hands, or it becomes, the county's. Because of its location, it's ideal place for anyone to build a business there. I wish there would be some way that we could keep this on the private market and have it be sold that way.
Thank you, Supervisor Defferting. Next speaker is Supervisor Albrecht.
I would urge you to support this and get rid of the piece of property. Dry cleaning solution is worse than gasoline, and having going through contamination costs myself, the cost that Winnebago County will pay because they have deep pockets will never stop. So I would urge you to get rid of it.
Thank you, Supervisor Albrecht. Next speaker, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask the treasurer? Yes. Yeah. Mary, why did we choose to use that statute?
We did not choose to use that statute. The city of Neenah did. We had no intentions of perfecting title on this property. We would have continued to let the taxes accumulate because it's contaminated. We typically do not want to take ownership to a contaminated property. There is this statute. This is the first time that it has been used that I am aware of in Winnebago County. And so, yeah, they learned of the statute and they sent us a letter.
They trumped us.
The statute is there. It is public record.
Has there been any investigation as to the remediation costs for this property? You've said that there was $300,000 in testing.
The testing has dated back to the grants, I should say, that they've obtained has been since 2002. I do not have an estimate of what the remediation cost would be. I do not have that.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker is Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly want to thank my colleagues for doing their research because their comments beg two questions, in my opinion, to be answered. First of all, can someone tell me why the city of Neenah will not reimburse us for the taxes or back taxes that we have accumulated, approximately at least $23,000? Is that a city council decision or just an administrative decision?
State statute,
Say that we cannot collect that?
absolutely.
Thank you. Has our attorney researched that statute, and could you comment on that?
Yes, when this resolution came through our office, I spoke with Mary, and I looked at 7517 because I was not familiar with it. And Mary is correct. It basically, you're stuck by relying on 7517. It's pretty clear.
So it would not be in our best interest to challenge the interpretation of that statute?
No, as I said, I looked at 7517, and my interpretation basically coalesced with what Mary was indicating.
So can this only be used by a municipality? This statute?
Yes, I believe so.
Correct.
I don't have it in front of me, but yeah.
Okay, because this is a can of worms, obviously, we're opening up here a little bit. So
Yeah,
I guess that kind of drives the decision somewhat. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Supervisor Eisen, I cannot recognize you because I've allowed you to speak twice on this resolution, so just following by our rules, I cannot recognize you. Any other speakers on the resolution? Okay. Given the questions, we'll go ahead and do it by a roll call vote. So if you are in favor of the motion to transfer the property to the city of Neenah, vote aye. If you're opposed, vote no. And I vote would to say yes to transfer the property to the city of Neenah. And that motion carries 33 to 2 with one abstention. Moving on to the next resolution. That is resolution number 064-082018. Authorize the transfer of $175,000 from the Winnebago County Undesignated General Fund account to the Winnebago County Park Capital Outlay account for the purpose of acquiring a 20-acre parcel adjoining the east boundary of the Sunnyview Exposition Center. I'll call on Supervisor Finch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for resolution number 064-082018. And Rob Way's in the back, so any questions, give it to him.
Thank you, Supervisor Finch. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, then we'll do it by voice vote. All those in favor, I apologize. Supervisor Eisen.
I ask that there be a recorded vote.
And we will accept that request. Next speaker is Supervisor Shorsey.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I support this resolution, and the only thing I would like to add is I'd like to request that from a financial perspective, that we develop a profit and loss report for that whole area of parks with Sunnyview and all the programming that goes on. So we're very aware of our return on our investment for the taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you. And the Parks Director is here, and he's acknowledging that request from the back. Very good. Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. Next speaker is Supervisor Ellis.
Thank you, Chairman. Just looking at this, there's going to be 14 acres that you're really buying here. You're going to have the other 6 acres If you look at what we're paying, it'll be $12,500 an acre. And the last land that we bought was the Brennan property. That's right next to an airport. Very, very good land. We paid right around $5,000 an acre. So just think about that before you vote.
Thank you, Supervisor Ellis. Next speaker is Supervisor Warnke.
Thank you. I'm going to be voting no on this resolution simply for the fact that I feel that the racing people were screwed on this deal and it was rammed through and they were shoved out. This county paid $1.5 million to develop that racetrack, and just because we had management problems, they threw it out and they wanted to get rid of it. So I see, and at the time we were debating it, I talked about buying more land and putting that stage on the land and keeping the racetrack, and nobody listened. And so that's simply the reason why I will be voting no on it. It just isn't right.
Thank you, Supervisor Warnke. Next speaker is Supervisor Binder.
I guess I'd just like to say that there isn't a lot of land around the Expo Center anymore. The land on 76, they want $1.5 million for 17 acres. So I guess if you want to look at, maybe we're paying $12,000 an acre, I still think it's better than almost $100,000 an acre. And we went with the idea, the county board wanted to basically go with the stage. So now we have the stage and we got to make this work if we want to basically be successful. And if we don't have areas for camping, what do we do when there's a big rainstorm and one of them areas get flooded out? We have another part of that we can move them to for the next event, where if we don't have that land and that land gets sold, it also can be annexed into the city of Oshkosh. And that's where the expo is, in the city of Oshkosh. And that land, they could build an apartment complex right next to us. That's basically the water and sewer, and all they have to do is basically annex it to the city of Oshkosh, and you could have a big apartment complex there. And how do you think our stage is going to do when you maybe have 200-300 people living within, a few hundred yards of that stage? I think it's basically, if we don't do it now, we're never going to have the opportunity to get that land again, especially for this price. So I urge you all to vote for it, and basically, hopefully this project goes forward and we actually have a good investment. The Life Fest put almost $1 million in that stage. And so far, we're looking at maybe $180,000 and $175,000 for the land, and the land's never going to go down. So I urge you all to vote for it and make the best out of this.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender. Next speaker is Vice Chairman Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you all remember how I felt about what happened to the racetrack and Life Fest and that, and I wasn't for or against either one of them, but I stated it very clear. But it's happened, it's past us, we know where we're at now, the stage is out there, the racetrack's gone. Now it's time to move on. We've got a chance to buy this land. It does cost us quite a bit more, like Supervisor Ellis had just said, but that property is the only property that's right there right now. Maybe someday the Costles will want to sell some of theirs or whatever, but right now that property's there. And I think we've got to move on. I'm sorry to say, but we got to forget about the racetrack. Life Fest stage is there. Maybe someday another, who knows, racetrack can be built there or something. But I think we got to quit going back and forth. It's over, it's done with, let's move on. I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Egan. Next speaker is Supervisor Norton.
Thank you. I'll just add on a little bit to what Supervisor Egan said. The myth that this is going to be done is being done just for Life Fest is a myth. We need this land for a couple different reasons. One reason that explained to me and back in March when I was first presented at a Parks Committee meeting was to help the traffic flow and egress and ingress. And when we have major events, when we have a major event at the stadium, if we call it now, and we have events like horse shows going on, we need that. Also, there's another major event, and maybe Rob, you want to tell them, there's a major event that is almost hinging on us getting this more land for them, who pays, and Rob, please speak up and come up, $80,000 a year, which pay almost half of this cost of getting this land. Are we going to throw that out? I don't think we can throw it away. We need the land. It's going to bring that large event and probably other large events that will pay for this land and other things in the near future. So I say that, like Supervisor Egan said, I think it's time to move on, and get this land, because it is needed for a number of different reasons, and go on. Thank you. Vote in favor of it.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Next speaker, Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Finch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I oppose Resolution 064082018, not on the merits of the purchase, but on a general principle that this county board needs to be informed on the status of our capital projects before approving additional capital project spending. And this is a capital project. I've discussed this matter through email with our county board chairman, and I believe that the county executive and finance director will provide an accounting at our special orders meeting in September. The finance department has provided us supervisors with the June 2018 financial highlights. Now, if you all recall getting those highlights, if you've got a computer, you can access those highlights. I don't expect you to have the paper copy with you, but the highlights identify 23 capital projects that we have initiated since December 2012 that are still active, 23 capital projects. It's authorized $27,398,703, and $14 million of that has been expended. That includes $5,570,000 authorized in 2018 up until June 30th, 2018, with an additional $2,750,000 that we approved in July. Now, because we're approaching the 2019 budget decision time, because the county board has not had a recent accounting for the status of projects authorized since December 2012, and because the county board continues to authorize new projects, and this is a new project, without the knowledge of the status of existing projects, good financial responsibility demands that this board be informed, and I hope to see that we'll get that information, but this conflicts with consideration of this resolution, and for that reason, I oppose it.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker is Supervisor Finch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, I'm for it. We're looking more in the future also. Don't forget this. You know, it's not just today or early tomorrow, but it's for the future. And I don't know of any time that, I got to be careful how I put this, I don't know of any time where I could not listen to the director and give me a legitimate answer. So for some people in this room are talking, but have they actually talked to the director of parks? The odds are probably not. So I guess where I'm coming from is I think we should pass this. I think it's not only for today, it's for the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Finch. Supervisor Shorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just point out to my colleagues that on August 2nd, Carol Blackmore sent us a June 2018 County Board Analysis Report that includes the status of capital projects.
Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll move to the vote. We'll do a roll call vote. So vote aye if you authorize the transfer of the $175,000 to Winnebago County Undesignated General Fund account. Vote no if you don't. And that motion carries 29-5 with one abstention. Moving on down to the next resolution. That's resolution number 065-082018. Authorize a 2-year agreement between Winnebago County and the State of Wisconsin Department of Health Services to provide competency restoration services to adult defendants while inmates in the Winnebago County Jail. I'll call on Supervisor Wingren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move approval of Resolution 65, August 2018.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? And we'll vote by a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on down to the next resolution. Resolution number 066-082018. Authorize payment of excess committee days, April 1, 2017 through March 31st, 2018. I'll call on Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for resolution number 066-08-2018.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I'd like to.
Please, go right ahead, Supervisor Rasmussen.
The committee vote on that actually is wrong. There should have been a update on our desk. There wasn't, but the committee vote was actually 3-2. And I know the board has always asked about the no votes. I was one of the no votes. Ever since I've been on the board, this has come up that we pay, or we approve it after it's been paid. And it's not a lot of money. It's not a big deal there that way. But the state law says that we have to approve this before it happens. We don't allow our employees to do that. We shouldn't allow ourselves to do that. We had a lot of discussion on this in committee. You know, we've got the second biggest county board in the state. And based on that, there's no reason for us to, anybody to exceed that number. I believe the state law is there because we're not supposed to use this as income. This is community service. We do get our per diem per meeting for our time. I just don't feel anybody should have to do that. The committee did charge me with talking to the county board chair, which I did, about he and the county exec getting together on these committee assignments and balancing this out a little bit more. And we had a nice discussion. County board chair can comment on that if he wants. But that was the reason for my no vote on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. And he's correct. We did have a nice conversation in regards to it. And so I will indeed have a conversation with our county executive because, as you know, it's committee assignments from a county board level, but also commissions, committee, and boards that make up those total committee days over a year. Any other discussion? Supervisor Konecki.
Mr. Chairman, so we're talking about next year then, right?
Excuse me?
How we're going to handle this next year?
In terms of the approval of this?
The payment, how are you going to authorize this?
Well, there's two issues here, frankly, if you want my opinion. There's one, the approval process and the timing of it, because it happens after the fact. I don't have a straight answer for you that yet. And two, then how you get to these numbers of committee days, and that's in regards to county board committee assignments and the commissions, committees, and boards. And that's where I'll definitely talk with the county executive in regards to that. But the timing of it, that is another question in terms of when we approve these, because you're right, we're approving them after the fact. So frankly, it'll take some thoughts and brainstorming from all folks, including you all, about how we might be able to do that timing differently. I don't have an answer today yet in regards to that. Thank you, Supervisor Konecki. Supervisor Lenz.
So just a quick, thank you, Chairman. Just a quick piece of clarification. So we've paid these, but we haven't approved them?
That's correct, and that's why I was saying there's really two items that I feel Supervisor Rasmussen is referring to and that the committee, I believe, was talking about, was A, in terms of going above the 30, because there is a state law, and that's why we vote on these, because we're voting to deviate from the law, which we have the ability to, but that's what we are doing.
So-
But two, the issue of the timing, because we are voting when the payments have already occurred.
So,
That is correct.
what would be the consequences if we don't approve these?
Frankly, there'd be no consequence as I know of it.
Okay.
I'm just being honest. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and do a roll call vote. Vote aye if you recommend approval of the Access Committee days. Vote no if you don't. And that motion carries 26-7 with one abstention. So moving on down to our last resolution of the evening, and that is resolution number 067-082018. Amend Rule 7.7 of the Rules of the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors. I'll call on Supervisor Wingren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move approval of Resolution 67-8-2018. Basically, long story short, this would clarify any problems we had with the last meeting interpretation and the recommendation or the opinion given by our corporation counsel. The idea here is that if we want to weigh in on something that's very important, in a copy of the resolution, let's say we favor flying the flag on 4th of July, the resolution must pass by more than just a majority, because we send a letter to the legislator or sometimes to the governor saying we support or we oppose something. If it passes by one vote and my name is on it, either way, I don't want other people to think that everybody else that voted no is either for or against something, if you understand what I'm saying. We just need to have a super majority when we weigh in and say, we as a board believe such and such. So this rule change will clarify that.
Thank you, Supervisor Wingren. There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Supervisor Keller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to thank the Judiciary and Public Safety Committee, our rulemaking committee, for bringing this resolution forward. During the last county board meeting, a resolution that came up that was not county board business, but was dealing with state or federal legislation. Corporation Council opinion that it did not require a three-quarters vote, as it was legislation that was not pending or the legislation was not in session. This rule change is simply an attempt to address that unintended interpretation. Subsequent to this rule being posted, I was advised by Corporation Council to amend the wording to further maintain the original intent. So I moved the following amendment to this resolution. In line 12, in front of the word initiate, I would like to add the words, the desire for. So line 12 would read, opposition or the desire for initiation of any state or federal legislation, and so on.
Okay, so there's an amendment to add three words, the desire for, after the or, in line 12. So as Supervisor Keller stated, it would say, any resolution that is presented for the purpose of expressing support, opposition, or the desire for initiation of any state or federal legislation shall require a 3/4 vote of those members present for passage. So was there a second? Second. Or there's a motion and a second. So any further debate is on the amendment. Any discussion in regards to the amendment? All right, then we'll do it by a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So that amendment passes, so now we are back on the main resolution with the addition of the three letters, the desire for, prior to initiation in line 12. Any other discussion than on the resolution as amended? Okay. Oh, Supervisor Eisen.
I request a recorded vote.
Very well, we will do a recorded roll call vote. So go ahead and vote aye if you approve for the amended Rule 7.7. Vote no if you don't. And just so we're all clear, this would require a 2/3 majority for passage of the amended resolution. And that's by our own rule book. It requires 2/3 in between organizational meetings, just so we're clear. And that motion carries 33-1 with 1 abstention. All right. So that concludes our agenda for this evening. So I will now call on Supervisor Roble for a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move that we adjourn until Tuesday, September 4th for a special order of business.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.